Okay guys, so we've been looking at different relationships, okay? So we've been looking at how to represent those relationships in a graph, how to represent those relationships in a table, and how to represent those relationships in an equation. Okay, so now we're going to dive deep into each of those relationships, okay? So a relationship contains two variables. So the relationship is comparing two different things, right? So like your speed to your time, your distance to your time, your amount of the total cost compared to the cost of the truck, those kind of things. Now your variables, there's two different types. So there's your dependent, okay, so this is the variable that is dependent on the other for its value, okay, and this is always your y value, so always your output value. Then your independent is the variable that is not dependent on the other for its value, and this is always your x value, so your input value. Okay, so if you look at this equation here, right, I've got two variables here at this moment because I don't know what the input value is and I don't know what the output value is unless I start putting it in. Okay, so I've got two variables, right? So I said your input value is always your independent value. So in this case, your n is your independent and your tn is always your y value. So it's always your output. So in this case, your tn is your dependent value. Okay, so we'll look at a practical example. If I did the relationship between your fitness and how much time you train a week. So obviously with how much time you train a week, if you spend more hours training, your fitness will increase. So that's a relationship. This is my two variables. These are the two things that I'm comparing, and these are the two things that I'm going to study the relationship of. So if I look at fitness, okay, is my fitness dependent on how much time you train in a week? Does it matter with my fitness, if you spend more time training, will my fitness increase? Yes, it will. So this variable is dependent. Okay? So this variable is dependent on how much time you train a week. As you train more during the week, then your fitness will increase. The less you train a week, the less your fitness is going to be. Okay? Now look at this variable. How much time you train in a week. Okay, so how much time you train in a week, is that dependent on your fitness? So if you're really fit, does that mean your time will change? No, it won't, because your time is independent. So your fitness depends on the time you train, but the time that you take to train a week doesn't depend on your fitness. Okay, so this is my independent value. Okay, so if I look at, say now, so height of my plant, so how much it grows, versus the amount of sunlight. Okay, if I look at these two, what is my independent variable and what is my dependent variable? Now look, is my height of my plant, so how high it grows, dependent on the amount of sunlight that it takes? Okay, yes it does, because my plant will grow higher if it receives more sunlight. Okay, so the height of my plant is dependent on the amount of sunlight. Okay, then the amount of sunlight, does that depend on the height of my plant? So does the sunny weather in my day depend on how high my plants grow? No, this stays the same. So it's independent value or independent variable. Okay, so now we're going to look at some examples how this will be asked. Alright, so if we look at the first example. So Cabello wants to install 2 TV sets in the house. His local audio-visual systems company gives him the following quote: 10 Rand per meter for cabling, plus 500 Rand per hour for labor, plus a call-out fee for 300 Rand. Okay, so this seems like a lot, but let's just take it question by question. So it says calculate what it will cost for 52 meters of cabling. So I go for my cabling and it said to me, I'm going to get 10 Rand per meter. Okay, and I need it for 50 meters. So I've got 10 Rand per 1 meter, okay? And I want to know if I've got 52 meters, how much will that cost me? Okay, so you cross multiply, and that will make it that your X is equal to 520 Rand. All right. Okay, now, so it will cost me 520 Rand for 52 meters of cabling. Now look, if 3 hours was spent on the job, what would the labor cost be? So I go and look, it says 500 Rand per hour for labor. Okay, so I know I've got 500 Rand per 1 hour. And now I don't know how much it's going to cost, and I want it for 3 hours. Okay, so I cross multiply, and I get 500 times 3, which is 1,500. Okay, and that will be my X, and that's how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost me 1,500 if the workers work 3 hours. Then I look, set up a table to show the relationship between labor costs and time, and it gives me an instruction. Add call out fee to labor costs and ignore the cabling for now. Okay, so I draw my table. Okay. Alright. And my input always goes here. So that is the amount of time. So the total time, okay, and my output will be how much it costs, so labor cost. Okay, I can discover which one to put where by just looking at dependent and independent variables. So, does my cost of labor depend on the time they take? Yes, it does. Okay, so my labor is dependent and my time is independent. Okay, so they don't work for 3 hours if the owner only pays 300 Rand. They will work and then they pay them afterwards depending on how much time they took. Okay, so if I look, okay, if they take 1 hour or 0 hours, let's start with 0. My labor cost will just be the call out fee because there's no labor cost for 0 hours, so it will just be the call out fee. Okay, then if they take 1 hour, so remember my hour will be times, my hours will be times by 500 Rand because that's my rate, so it will be 500 Rand per hour. So I take 1 times 500, okay, which is 500, and then I have to add the call out fee like they told me, which is 300. Okay, so 1 times 500 gives me 500, plus 300 gives me 800. If I do for 2 hours, so 2 hours times 500 gives me 1,000 plus 300, 1,300. 3 hours. 3 times 500 gives me 1,500 plus 300, which gives me 1,800, and you can carry on. Okay, now they ask what are the dependent variables and the independent, and we said the dependent is the total cost because my labor cost depends on how much time they took to complete it. So the labor cost is my dependent, and my independent is the time it took. Okay, please drop a message if you don't understand this. Complete the exercise on Khan Academy. I'll link it in the PowerPoint. Okay, and then do the exercises that I've allocated to you guys. Please drop a message if you don't understand.